It was a bright and sunny morning when Shim Jae-sip found himself sleeping in an unfamiliar place. As he sat up, a wave of shock washed over him upon seeing the situation around him. Confused and overwhelmed, he began to blame himself, silently repeating that he must have done something foolish. He reminded himself that his name was Shim Jae-sip, a college student, and wondered what in the world had happened there. Looking around, he noticed that 3 girls were sleeping beside him, deepening his confusion. His thoughts raced as he tried to recall the events of the previous night, but all he could remember was being drunk. He vaguely recalled that they had all participated in a cardio session the night before. The idea slowly crept into his mind that he may have seriously messed up, possibly with all 3 girls. He was convinced he had made a huge mistake, and it all seemed to have started just a few hours ago. His memory took him back to about 3 hours earlier, when he had been at a group meeting. Moon Ae-ri, a 23-year-old fellow student from his college, had been shouting at the group in frustration, her voice rising particularly at Ju Sua. She had demanded to know how Sua could be so careless, especially after being tasked with finding research materials, only to submit a copy-pasted article from Wikipedia. Ju Sua had looked confused and asked if Ae-ri was really speaking to her. Ae-ri snapped back, saying she could have at least taken the time to annotate the article. Sua responded hesitantly, admitting that she wasn't good at annotating. Another girl in the group, Bang Si-hyun, a 20-year-old junior, tried to defuse the tension by suggesting that she could handle the parts assigned to Sua instead. Sua, touched by her kindness, thanked Si-hyun warmly, calling her gesture very considerate. But Ae-ri immediately objected, saying that letting Si-hyun cover for Sua would only encourage her bad habits. Offended, Sua questioned how Ae-ri could speak like that to her senior. Ae-ri didn't back down and reminded her that this wasn't the first time. In previous projects, Sua had made similar excuses, saying she was too busy while others ended up doing all the work. Sua defended herself, saying that she at least tried to make it up to the group by buying them drinks, cheering them up, and making sure they weren't bored. Ae-ri coldly responded that those efforts were useless and didn't contribute to the actual work. Then she turned to Shim Jae-sip, telling him to stop sitting silently and say something. Just then, Jae-sip's phone buzzed with a message from someone saved as Honey. It read, "Let's stop seeing each other. My mother says we don't match." The group members immediately noticed his pale expression and asked what was wrong. As he sat there in stunned silence, he reflected on how the message had arrived during their group meeting. The pain of that sudden breakup hit him hard, and he began crying uncontrollably. It had only been 2 days since the breakup, and he felt like he had been completely abandoned. His mind spiraled with desperate thoughts. He even questioned whether this was a dream. He wondered if spinning his phone would break the illusion or if jumping off the building might snap him awake. Everyone in the group panicked as they noticed his strange behavior. They rushed to stop him, shouting at him and asking if he had gone crazy. But for Jae-sip, the heartbreak had come so suddenly that it felt unreal. Later that night, in an effort to lift his spirits, the 3 girls decided to throw a party just for him. Their idea was simple, to get completely blackout drunk and help him forget the pain. Jae-sip recalled how they kept handing him drinks until his heartbreak began to blur. During the party, Sua leaned toward him and asked if he was feeling any better. He responded weakly that he guessed he was. Sua gently told him not to let the breakup get to him. If a girl could end things simply because her mother told her to, she clearly wasn't worth his sorrow. She encouraged him to forget someone like that and move on, telling him he could get revenge just by finding someone even better. Tears welled up in his eyes again as he looked at her, asking if she really thought someone like him, a loser, could ever find someone new. Sua reassured him that if he couldn't, she'd introduce someone to him herself. For now, though, she told him to cry his heart out and promised to listen to whatever he needed to say. After all, there was no rule that said a guy couldn't cry. Moon Ae-ri chimed in, suggesting they drink all night and promising to take care of him. But Sua pulled him closer and challenged Ae-ri, saying this wasn't what they had agreed to. He was only supposed to drink a little. She questioned how Ae-ri could just leave him in this state, especially after what had happened earlier when he nearly tried to harm himself. Ae-ri tried to defend herself, insisting that she wasn't being cold-hearted, but that their project still needed to be completed. She turned to Si-hyun, asking her to weigh in, but Si-hyun sided with Sua, calling Ae-ri out for being heartless. Ae-ri, taken aback, asked if Si-hyun was drunk. But Si-hyun insisted that Jae-sip was going through something terrible and deserved their support, not indifference. She assured Jae-sip that she would stay by his side, saying she liked the idea of doing so. Sua added that the vote was now 3-1 and teased Ae-ri, asking what she would do now. Then she called out to the waiter, requesting 5 bottles of soju and 2 pitchers of beer. Back in the present, Jae-sip lay there with fragments of the previous night flashing through his mind. He remembered everything up to that moment, but after that, it was all a blur. He couldn't figure out why the night had ended the way it did. He wondered how much he had drunk for his memory to have vanished so completely. Yet, despite everything, one thing became clear to him, and that realization brought a strange happiness. But as the clarity set in, he knew he had to leave before he started overthinking. Staying there any longer would only get him into more trouble. It was in room 302 of the college building where everything seemed to resume its usual pace, at least on the surface. After the strange incident that morning, Shim Jae-sip had made his way back to college. One of his friends approached him, noticing something odd, and asked what was wrong, pointing out how dull he looked. Jae-sip sat silently, lost in his thoughts, yet a faint smile played on his face. He was quietly thinking to himself that he couldn't recall everything that had happened. His friend, noticing the unusual smile, commented that he seemed overly excited and asked if something good had happened. Jae-sip simply replied that nothing had happened. His friend didn't buy it and questioned what he meant by nothing, especially after all that had gone on. Jae-sip, still lost in thought, admitted internally that, to be honest, what had occurred that morning had been mentally exhausting, something he wished he could erase from his memory. Yet, even with all the chaos, there were small positives. He had gotten a glimpse of the girls' workout techniques, and even if he had gotten slapped, maybe it was worth it. Who knew what would come of it? As he sat in class, he noticed Ae-ri sitting nearby. Looking at her, he began wondering if perhaps that chaotic incident had somehow brought him closer to the 3 girls. Ae-ri suddenly caught him smiling and snapped at him, asking what he was looking at and if he had a death wish. Embarrassed, he quickly turned his face away and muttered that it was nothing. Even now, he felt uncertain about what had actually taken place that morning. The incident had created a distance between them, and it seemed their lives had all shifted because of it. Ever since that day, many things had changed. During a recent group project discussion, he had asked Si-hyun if she could hand him the summary on financial returns. She appeared nervous and avoided eye contact as she passed him the summary, unable to meet his eyes. Then Ae-ri walked over and reminded Jae-sip sternly that if he had anything to say, he should send a message instead of speaking directly. She has become more arrogant lately. She added coldly that if he spoke without permission again, she would remove him from the group. Her constant irritation with him was becoming exhausting. Among them all, Sua was the only one who hadn't changed, at least not entirely. When she found out that Ae-ri had tried to push Jae-sip out of the group, Sua had stepped in to defend him, trying to reason with Ae-ri. Actually, Sua had changed slightly. She had started to show more of her true self to him. The emotional distance between them seemed to shrink. At first, he thought she might be trying to grow closer to him, but over time, he began to doubt that was her intention. A few days ago, he and Sua had found themselves alone in the meeting room, but that day, she had just sat there quietly, doing nothing, and then left without a single word, as if there had been no purpose to their meeting. He wondered if he had done something wrong to upset her and couldn't understand why she was acting so distant. During one of the project sessions, Ae-ri had lashed out at him again, accusing him of formatting the SPSS file incorrectly. He had looked back at her and reminded her that she had asked him to do something he didn't even know how to do. She snapped again, demanding why he couldn't even answer her properly. But he remained silent, thinking to himself that she had already instructed him not to speak in group settings. Seeing the tension, Sua quickly stepped in and suggested they take a short break. She stood up and started to walk out. Ae-ri, annoyed, asked where she was going. Sua replied that she didn't like the atmosphere in the room and needed some fresh air. She sarcastically added that she didn't realize she now needed Ae-ri's permission for everything just because she was the team leader. She told them all to take it easy. Jae-sip silently thanked Sua in his mind, knowing she had helped him avoid yet another outburst or possible escalation with Ae-ri. That night, while walking through the streets, He reflected on the day. He thought things had gone okay, but the reality of having to deal with this situation for the next 3 months weighed heavily on him. It was too late to drop the course now. Suddenly, Sua appeared behind him, playfully asking where he was headed, addressing him as young man. Surprised, he turned around and asked what had brought her there. He was about to comment on her sudden appearance when she cut him off and warned him to watch where he was walking, saying he almost stepped into the street and could have been hit by a car. She added that the road was always ahead and that there wasn't enough time to be looking down. He smiled and asked where she had heard something like that. She replied by asking him the same, and he told her it was a line from a webtoon. She then shifted the conversation, asking if Ae was the reason behind his mood. She told him not to worry too much, explaining that Ae was only acting that way because she felt embarrassed. Jae-seop asked what exactly Ae was embarrassed about. Sua replied that Ae didn't like looking vulnerable or appearing rattled in front of others. Then she leaned in a little closer to him and admitted softly that on that day, Ae had been feeling really embarrassed. Sua suggested that they should go together, just the two of them. Jae-seop's mind instantly froze on those words. Just the two of them, he wondered if it meant what he thought it did. Or perhaps it was simply about doing a workout session together. Sua smiled at him in response, offering no further explanation, while Jae-seop, flustered, tried to downplay his reaction and stated that it should be straightforward. She asked him what he wanted and questioned whether he was going to do the cardio session with her or not. He sat there in silence, caught in a storm of thoughts. He considered the consequences. If he accepted her offer, he would end up skipping the team meeting, which would definitely make Eri furious. On the other hand, if he requested Sua to postpone the session until after the meeting, she might coldly dismiss him with a phrase like, "Forget about it, loser," and walk away as she often did when annoyed. Yet if he chose to skip the session, he would have to deal with Eri's wrath. The aftermath terrified him. The entire situation felt like a genuine dilemma. Sua observed him with mild impatience and asked why he was overthinking something so simple. She pressed him to just give an answer. Did he want to do the exercise session with her, or did he not? Jae-seop admitted to himself that she was right. This wasn't something that required deep contemplation. Meanwhile, Sua found amusement in watching him struggle with such a simple decision, silently thinking that the boy was having a hard time making up his mind. He kept calculating every outcome. If he picked Sunbae, he would enjoy the present moment, but likely face consequences later. If he chose the team meeting, he'd be miserable now but safe afterward. And if he begged and pleaded a little, maybe Sunbae would agree to play a video game with the group instead. Weighing all his options, the answer became obvious to him. Later, Sua and Jae-seop found themselves inside her residence. Sua opened the fridge and casually asked if he was fine with just beer. Jae-seop respectfully answered yes, and she handed him a bottle. She then commented that she had some snacks around somewhere and began looking for them. The two sat together and began to relax. Jae-seop took a sip of his drink and remarked that he lived for this kind of taste. He recalled the times when it had been illegal for him to drink and wondered aloud how people had even managed to survive without it. He noted to himself that Sua was just 1 year ahead of him at their college. His gaze lingered on her. He noticed how relaxed she seemed in her outfit and movement. She liked drinking, she liked dancing, and she reminded him of those carefree girls who enjoyed attention. But as he thought further, he realized that this was their first time drinking alone together. Sua turned to him and asked why he was sitting so far away. She encouraged him to move a little closer, teasingly questioning whether he was shy. Then she affectionately referred to him as her little Jae-seop and said it was cute. Jae-seop felt awkward. He wasn't sure how to respond to being called cute. It felt strange to be described that way as a man. Yet he acknowledged to himself that perhaps that's just how she was. Sua treated everyone with the same friendliness, without any form of discrimination. Still, there were moments when he truly had no idea what went through her head. As the evening progressed, he admitted that he was slowly beginning to feel ready for the workout session. He remembered that Sua was now 24 years old and, under normal circumstances, she would have already graduated. He would not be seeing her around campus anymore. But as he had heard, she had studied abroad for 2 years, which explained her continued presence at the university. Perhaps her time abroad also explained why she was so comfortable getting close to him. Eventually, Sua mentioned that they had finished eating and suggested they get ready for a late-night yoga session. They began stretching and preparing for it. She started asking about various yoga techniques and methods with intense curiosity. Jae-seop guided her through each step, noting to himself how strange the whole situation was. She remained focused on learning and even remarked that he could do whatever he wanted. She would do anything for the sake of this yoga session. As they continued, Jae-seop reflected that this was technically his second time doing yoga. Eri sat quietly on the bus, her gaze fixed on the city lights blurring past the window. Her mind was far from the present moment, replaying everything that had happened. She couldn't shake the growing feeling that something was off. One by one, everyone had left without saying much. Was it really just a coincidence that it happened while she had gone to the bathroom for a short while? She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, only to see a message from Sihyun waiting for her. The message read that she wasn't feeling well and had decided to leave early. Reading that message left a strange emptiness in Eri's chest. Of all the people, Sihyun was the one she thought would never quietly disappear like that. Had she really been unwell, or was it an excuse? Eri couldn't help but wonder if she was the common thread, the root of the unease in the group. Her thoughts shifted back to the recent confrontation. She remembered the cold, defiant expression on Suhan's face when he had said that he didn't need her permission to step outside, even if she was the team leader. That moment had hit her harder than she had let on. Now, sitting alone with only the quiet hum of the bus engine and the weight of her thoughts, guilt began to creep in. Maybe she had been too controlling. Maybe she had pushed everyone too hard. Her pride wouldn't allow her to admit it earlier, but deep inside, she was beginning to realize her approach might have alienated those she was trying to work with. She sighed, thinking to herself that perhaps she owed both Sua and Jae-seop an apology if not for her actions, then at least for the misunderstanding that followed them. Elsewhere, Jae-seop and Sua were immersed in their resistance cardio session in the quiet privacy of her room. The atmosphere was relaxed, lit by soft lighting and the faint rustling of their movements. Jae-seop offered to introduce more workout techniques, clearly eager to take the lead. Jae-seop was sitting with his friends in the college courtyard, enjoying a rare moment of idle chatter between lectures. One of his friends casually brought up that he had played a gaming session with his girlfriend the previous night. That comment immediately sparked interest among the group. Another friend leaned in, curious, and asked how the experience had gone. The first friend replied with a smirk, half serious and half joking, saying there wasn't really anything else to do with a girlfriend besides playing a game. He wondered aloud whether that was okay or not. The group laughed, and another friend chimed in, asking for more details. He encouraged him to spill how it really went, eager to hear the inside story. The first friend scratched his head and said it was hard to describe in words, but all he could say was that it had been amazing, so good, in fact, that he felt awesome afterward. Jae-seop raised an eyebrow and responded, puzzled by his friend's enthusiasm, questioning what exactly he was saying. The friend, clearly enjoying the attention, explained that there was no better way to describe the situation, and unfortunately, it wasn't something he could show them either. It had to be experienced firsthand. Still skeptical, Jae-seop teased that maybe the whole thing wasn't actually all that great. His friend became visibly annoyed and asked sharply what Jae-seop meant by that. Jae-seop shrugged and remarked that he had heard someone once say that playing certain video games with a girlfriend, especially the more intense kind, could feel good but also came with responsibilities. He added that one had to be considerate of the girl, worry about the aftermath, and that it took a surprising amount of effort. His friend rolled his eyes and replied sarcastically, telling Jae-seop to say whatever he wanted if it made him feel better. Meanwhile, Jae-seop kept his thoughts to himself, thinking that there was absolutely no competition in the way his friend spoke. He silently called men idiots for exaggerating things like this. He reflected to himself, wondering if his friend had truly meant that it was better than playing an actual video game. It didn't even feel like Jae-seop had taught him much, and yet the guy seemed overly satisfied. He thought back to that night and recalled how exhausting the gaming session had been, especially considering the fact that they had gone through it 3 times in a row. No matter how his friend described it, Jae-seop believed the experience was clearly intense and had probably left him more tired than he'd admit. Sua was sitting casually with her friend at the campus cafe when her friend suddenly leaned in and said with a grin that she had received a love confession the day before. Curious, Sua turned to her and asked who had confessed. Her friend replied that it was from a freshman. Sua raised an eyebrow and remarked that her friend must really have some game, then asked who the victim was this time. Her friend giggled and pointed in the distance, whispering that the boy with the earbuds in was the one. It was Jaesiop. As if to prove her point, her friend suddenly called out loudly, trying to get his attention. Sua hadn't noticed him before and turned her head with a surprised look. She watched him walk right past them without even glancing in their direction. Turning back to her friend, Sua muttered in disbelief that he had just completely ignored her. Her friend shrugged, saying that he was probably embarrassed because she had rejected him. Sua, a bit puzzled, asked why she had turned him down. The girl explained that he seemed like a loser to her. She elaborated that during a gathering with their department, when everyone was drinking and having fun at karaoke, Jaesiop had started singing Nuna, You Are My Woman, and ended it with a dramatic love confession. Sua winced and said it was a shame, especially for someone as cute as him. Her friend looked at her strangely and repeated the word, cute, clearly not convinced. Sua simply smiled and said that awkward boys like Jaesiop always had a cute side to them. She admitted to herself that when she first saw Jaesiop, she had thought of him as a shy, clumsy freshman, someone she could tease a little, maybe play around with and teach. That had been her initial intention. But now, thanks to him, things had taken a different turn. She began to recall the memory of their recent workout sessions together. She thought back to that particular yoga session where Jaesiop, clearly overwhelmed, had suddenly stood up and said he needed to use the bathroom. She nodded, giving him permission with a smirk, wondering at the time if the intense training had finally pushed him over the edge. But to her astonishment, he had come back later, looking more energized than ever, and even asked if he should buy some protein bars for the both of them. She remembered him calculating out loud that they might need an entire box at the rate they were going. He had said that despite everything, the workouts felt great, and he always felt fresh afterward. As she was still lost in thought, Jaesiop suddenly spoke and asked her if she had any water stored in her closet. Startled, Sua blinked and asked what he meant. What kind of person would keep water in their closet? He responded that he had asked because it looked like her cupboard was moving slightly. Confused, Sua got up to investigate. When she opened the cupboard door, both she and Jaesiop were stunned to see someone crouching inside. It was Sihyun, sitting curled up in the small space. With a sheepish look on her face, Sihyun apologized quietly, saying she had completely forgotten she was there. Sua was fully aware that Sihyun had been hiding in the cupboard. In fact, it was Sua who had instructed her to hide there. Now, with all three of them sitting in the room together, Jaesiop turned to them and demanded an explanation. He asked them to tell him clearly what was going on. Sua calmly admitted that Sihyun had asked if she could watch them during their yoga session, and she had given her permission. Jaesiop looked incredulous, asking if she had really allowed something like that, to which Sua nodded and started laughing lightly, clearly trying to brush it off. He warned her not to try laughing her way out of this. She shouldn't think she could cover up such a situation with humor. Sua, still amused, recalled how earlier that day, while she and Jaesiop had been on campus discussing the idea of having a private workout session, just the two of them, Sihyun had overheard their conversation. She had approached Sua while she was packing up her things and, with shy but eager eyes, asked whether it would be okay if she quietly watched their training session. Back in the present moment, Jaesiop questioned Sua again, wanting to understand why she had actually allowed Sihyun to observe them. Sua explained that it had been impossible to say no to Sihyun when she had looked so adorably desperate. Then, as if to emphasize her affection, she reached out and hugged Sihyun. Jaesiop wasn't convinced and reminded her that there were certain boundaries that shouldn't be crossed when it came to sharing private moments with others. Sua, however, remained unbothered and casually replied that it wasn't a big deal. She pointed out that the three of them had already trained together before, already shared techniques and experiences. There wasn't really anything left to hide. To her, there was no harm in someone watching what had already been seen. Still unconvinced, Jaesiop tried to insist, but before he could continue, Sihyun stepped in. She looked visibly ashamed and began apologizing sincerely. She admitted that her request had been odd and that she hadn't meant to make him uncomfortable. Without waiting for his response, she suddenly turned and rushed out of the room, clearly overwhelmed by embarrassment. Sua and Jaesiop both remained frozen in place, silently watching her leave. Outside, Sihyun was running in the direction of her house, eyes brimming with tears. Her thoughts were spiraling. She kept thinking about how Jae-seop had asked her why she had gotten so curious about something like that. She told herself that it wouldn't have been a problem if she had simply ignored her curiosity, if she had just let it go. Then they wouldn't have seen how humiliated she'd felt. Now, she didn't know what to do or how she could face them the next day. Just then, she heard someone calling her name. She froze at the sound of Jae-seop's voice. Without turning to look at him, she broke into a faster run, trying desperately to escape. She thought to herself that she wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. But Jae-seop kept running after her, calling out and asking her to stop, to wait and hear him out. She shouted back that she didn't want to listen, that he shouldn't follow her. As she darted down the street, she nearly collided with a delivery guy passing by on a motorbike. But before the impact could happen, Jae-seop reached her in time and pulled her into his arms, shielding her from harm. The delivery man came to a halt and checked if they were all right. Jae-seop quickly assured him that everything was fine, and the man drove away. Jae-seop looked at Sihyun with concern and asked if she was okay and if she had been hurt. After confirming she was all right, he told her that he had been shocked when she suddenly ran out of the house like that. She had left both her wallet and phone behind. He explained that Sua had told him to catch up with her and return her belongings. He reached into his bag and handed her the items. Now sitting on a bench together, she quietly thanked him. Jae-seop stood up and said he would head back soon, but asked what she planned to do. He mentioned that it was dangerous to be outside so late and offered to walk her to the station or get her a taxi. If she felt uncomfortable with him, he would stay back at a distance but still make sure she got home safely. Sihyun hesitated, then suddenly asked whether he was angry with her. He seemed confused and asked her why she thought that. She admitted that she had peeked at him and Sua during their exercise session without his permission. Naturally, he should have been upset with her. Jae-seop gently replied that he wasn't mad. She looked at him in disbelief and asked again, unsure if she had heard him right. He reassured her, saying that she had already apologized and that it wasn't done with ill intent. Still unsure, she asked if things were really okay now, if that was truly all. He asked her whether she actually wanted him to be mad at her. She hurriedly said no, it wasn't like that at all. She explained that she had been so worried she was considering whether to transfer schools or even drop out. He smiled faintly and told her there was no need for anything so drastic. But then, with a more serious tone, he admitted he wanted to ask her something, whether she really had wanted to watch the two of them doing cardio together. She froze at the question, unsure how to respond. He then added that she probably didn't remember what had happened that night, implying that she wasn't the only one with memory loss. They had both been blackout drunk, and neither remembered exactly what had taken place. Sihyun stared at him in shock, and he quickly tried to brush it off, saying it was nothing. Then she began to explain herself. She said that the reason she wanted to watch them exercising was to try to recover her memory of that night, to recall what she had done with him. She hadn't imagined it would look the way it had. She had just wanted to know what had happened. At last, she looked at him and said she had one more request. She asked him if he could teach her the same exercise technique that he had taught Sua. Jae-seop replied that he probably could, though he still couldn't remember everything. Sihyun looked at him with sincerity and said she wanted to understand it for herself, to know how it felt to go through the workout session firsthand. Jae-seop furrowed his brows slightly, unsure if he had heard her right. He glanced at Sihyun, trying to process her words, and asked what exactly she had just said. Sihyun, caught between her nervousness and a rush of impulsive honesty, clarified that she had been referring to the feeling of the emotional and physical sensation during the workout. She wanted to know how it felt, whether it had been as good as it looked. Her tone was hesitant, and her gaze wandered. She admitted she had never done such exercises with others before and lacked the experience to understand how it differed when shared. It was curiosity pure and raw that drove her to ask. Jae-seop paused, his eyes studying her more closely. The question wasn't inappropriate, but the sincerity behind it was unexpected. He asked her slowly if she was really that interested in the feeling of the workout. Sihyun, startled by the way he phrased it, quickly responded with a forced casualness that it was for reference. She claimed she needed it for taking notes for her art. But even as she tried to appear unaffected, the heat in her cheeks betrayed her. Her voice wavered, and her composure faltered. Jae-seop tilted his head, confused yet curious. He asked what kind of art she meant, But before she could answer, his thoughts drifted to a memory from the past, a faint recollection of something that now seemed clearer. It had been a lecture hall back in their university days. The professor had been delivering a long, drawn-out lesson on Freud, speaking about how the concept of libido was central to understanding human behavior and how even desire could be intellectualized. Jae-seop remembered feeling bored out of his mind. It was during that dull moment that he noticed Sihyun at the corner of the room, quietly sketching something in her notebook. At the time, they hadn't been close, but he had admired her silent focus, the calmness in her movements as she sketched. Her pencil moved lightly but confidently, and from his seat, he could tell she was talented. He remembered thinking she must be good at drawing. Later that day, as they were leaving class, he tried to make casual conversation. With a grin, he called out, "Hey, Miss Artist Sihyun." To his surprise, she had immediately stiffened and turned around, her eyes wide. He had laughed awkwardly, telling her not to be so surprised he'd simply seen her sketching in her notebook. He had even asked if she was working on a webtoon or something, but Sihyun had abruptly denied it. Her tone turned firm and distant. She claimed he had seen it wrong, that she didn't know how to draw. He remembered feeling taken aback. She apologized and quickly made an excuse about another class before walking away in a hurry. At the time, he had just stood there, watching her disappear down the hallway, confused and a little embarrassed. Now everything made sense. In the present, Jae-seop looked at her and mentioned that she must have started drawing back in high school. That day, she probably didn't want to admit it out of embarrassment. Sihyun nodded quietly, confirming his hunch. He asked if she uploaded her drawings online, maybe earning some money through them. She admitted that she did nothing serious, just some uploads here and there with the occasional donation. It was more of a side hobby than anything else. Jae-seop's eyes lit up in genuine admiration. He exclaimed that it was honestly pretty cool. He had never imagined her as someone with an artistic side, let alone someone who monetized it. But Sihyun quickly tried to downplay it. She insisted that he was getting the wrong idea. She wasn't a real artist, it was only a casual outlet, something she did when she felt stressed. She uploaded the drawings to certain platforms where people could donate if they liked her work. That was all. Still, Jae-seop shrugged with a smile, saying it didn't matter whether she considered herself an artist or not. It was still impressive and something worth being proud of. Sihyun looked at him, trying to gauge if he really meant it. Then, she hesitated for a moment, debating whether to tell him the truth. Finally, she confessed why she found it embarrassing. She lowered her voice and admitted that the drawings weren't exactly normal ones. They were sus. The words hung awkwardly in the air, and her face turned a deep shade of red. She couldn't even meet his gaze as she said it. She then glanced at him again and asked if, now that they were getting closer, they could be honest with each other. Jae-seop nodded, still a little stunned but trying to keep his expression neutral. Sihyun took a deep breath, opened her phone, and showed him her private collection of artwork. Despite her nervousness, there was a strange energy in her eyes, almost excitement. She scrolled through the screen, revealing illustration after illustration, each one meticulously drawn, emotional, sensual, and artistic in its own right. Jae-seop's reaction was calm. He praised her, telling her that her technique was impressive and the number of drawings was honestly surprising. It looked like she had done over 100 pieces. Sihyun explained that she usually drew when she was stressed or needed to release emotion. Art was a way for her to manage what she couldn't express out loud. Jae-seop nodded again, absorbing all of it. It was strange, yes, but also very human. He could see now why she had been so hesitant. It wasn't about shame, it was about vulnerability. Sihyun laughed a little, self-conscious but relieved. She told him it was okay, he could be honest if he thought she was weird. Even though she sometimes thinks so. She described herself as an awkward person, someone whose mind wandered to sensual drawings even on random days. Her tone was soft, almost like she was still asking for permission to be accepted. Jae-seop looked at her and said gently that it must have taken a lot of courage to say all that. She nodded, saying it felt as if a weight had finally been lifted off her chest. It wasn't just about the drawing. It was about hiding a part of herself for so long. Now, for the first time, she felt lighter, less burdened. Her anxiety had melted into something closer to peace. He asked if she was really saying that being open had actually helped her. She nodded again, more certain this time. She said that even though drawing itself didn't make her feel that way, being able to talk about it with someone being understood felt incredibly freeing. Then, in a quiet voice, she reminded him of what he had promised earlier, that he would keep her secret safe. Jae-seop gave her a small smile and told her not to worry. Everything she had told him would stay with him. His lips, he promised, were sealed. He even joked that they were as heavy as stone now. Sihyun smiled widely, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. A visible tension had left her shoulders. But after a brief pause, she looked at him again with a different kind of nervousness, one that carried a strange mix of hope and boldness. She told him there was one more thing she needed help with. If he had some time, perhaps he could help her with that too. Sihyun had started showing him the balloon she had brought with her. Jae-seop grew visibly nervous at the sight, unable to hide his confusion. He asked her, his voice shaky, what exactly she was doing. She responded with quiet determination, explaining that this was her resolve. She told him she felt it was necessary to go this far to do this kind of exercise so that the sincerity in her heart could somehow reach him. She went on to admit something deeper. Ever since that day after the incident involving him, she had been unable to draw. No matter how much effort she put in, her hand simply wouldn't move, and a sense of satisfaction remained completely out of reach. Whether it was drawings of men or women, every sketch she created felt fake and soulless to her. The expressions, the emotions, the life, none of it translated into her art. She then looked at him with pleading eyes, asking if he could help her overcome this block, so she could study the male form and experience through him. Meanwhile, back at home, Sua was busy with the laundry. She had just finished washing the clothes and sighed in relief. Looking toward the door, she wondered aloud why they hadn't returned yet. The time had passed and passed again, and it was already quite late. Her thoughts wandered with a smirk forming on her lips. She wondered if perhaps the two of them had gotten caught up doing an extended workout session. Then she laughed to herself, brushing off the idea by thinking that if that were true, then Jae-seop must have come a long way in stamina. If he could keep going like that, he wouldn't be human at all, because the kind of exercise Sihyun referred to wasn't an easy one. Still smiling, she reminded herself to prepare before the kids came back. At that time, inside Monal's room number 602, Jae-seop was standing under the warm spray of the shower. His thoughts circled back to what had happened earlier. He hadn't expected that kind of proposal from Sihyun. It had completely taken him by surprise. He reflected on the tension that tended to rise in him when he was drunk and admitted to himself that he had always thought of Sihyun as a quiet and reserved kid. But now, clearly, appearances were deceiving. He thought to himself that such a request wasn't something just anyone could make. And yet, with her, it felt oddly acceptable. He wasn't sure about how other people would feel, but he could sense that, for her, this was something serious. For himself too, perhaps there was a strange calm forming inside, like the permission to take action whenever he wanted. Then again, he reminded himself he wasn't necessarily a trustworthy man. Finishing his shower, he stepped out and casually called out to Sihyun that he was done. She responded with an "all right." But as he turned to face her, he was met with a surprising sight. She had changed into a gown and taken off her glasses. He paused, clearly surprised and confused to see her like that. She quickly explained that the gown had just been lying around, so she had decided to try it on. Without her glasses, her face looked strikingly different. He found her cute, perhaps even more captivating than some characters in comics, and he admitted to himself that while he had often seen depictions like this in stories, he had never witnessed it in real life. She looked at him and asked softly whether she looked strange like that. He responded quickly, still a bit shy, telling her that no, he thought it looked really good on her. Once again, he reminded himself that appearances could never truly reveal a person's depths. Sihyun then requested that he sit beside her, and he agreed, taking a spot close to her on the bed. As the gap between them lessened, his thoughts grew heavier. He remembered that she had asked for his help, and that was why they had come here in the first place. But now that they were here, he wasn't sure how exactly he was supposed to help her. Then he recalled that she had mentioned wanting to learn about men. That left him wondering, should he guide her in a more direct way, like a man was expected to? Noticing something off about him, Sihyun asked why he was sweating so much. He quickly responded that he tended to sweat a lot naturally, but then asked why she was inquiring, did she have something to say. She seemed hesitant for a moment and then asked whether they could perhaps resume their cardio session. The suggestion surprised him. It was indeed true that cardio had helped them bond earlier, but the way she said it made the air feel heavier, filled with another kind of tension. To ease the atmosphere, Jae-seop started explaining, though awkwardly, that the difference between men and women largely lay in their anatomy. And so, if she truly wanted to understand men for the sake of her art, perhaps the most effective way was through observation and examining the male form directly. He continued, telling her that he was thinking of helping her through this study of hers. But the moment he said it, she stared at him silently, making him feel incredibly self-conscious. He quickly added that it was embarrassing to be looked at like that. Then she said, almost as if thinking aloud, that there had been that incident before, one where she had also used techniques to draw realism. He nodded, agreeing with her, and then asked if something was wrong. Changing the subject again, he said he had been thinking about how different the protein bars were now, compared to what he remembered. Based on the data he had seen in videos, he wondered aloud how to describe the difference. Then, trying to shift the topic entirely, he began explaining about the workout stick's functions, when to use it, and how it fit into a routine. Sihyun listened for a while before asking whether he knew that men often got exhausted when they worked out intensely. He said yes, of course. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, she brought up another question, asking if he thought she was prettier than Eri Sunbae, or if her fashion sense matched Sua Sunbi's. He didn't know how to respond, and the silence spoke louder than any words. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and disappointment clouded her features. She asked again, more softly this time, whether he truly wasn't excited about the workout anymore. He looked at her, struggling for words, and eventually said that it wasn't like that. He was just too tired to find the energy to continue. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure if it was fatigue or something more complex and harder to explain. She sat there staring at the dumbbell, her gaze fixed with an odd expression, before murmuring aloud that it felt strange. Had Sihyun always been like this? Jae-seop, who was quietly observing her from the side, didn't respond at first. Instead, a single thought echoed through his mind. She felt like a completely different person now. He couldn't reconcile this version of her with the shy girl he used to know. He instinctively tried to steer her away from the ongoing conversation, attempting to ease the tension that had started building up. But Sihyun, firm in her tone, stopped him immediately. She reminded him pointedly of the promise he had made, asking if he had already forgotten. She told him that today was the day they had agreed on this study, and that he had promised her. It had felt really good doing the exercise together. But moments later, as she focused on the exercise and followed his lead, a subtle change came over her. She admitted with some surprise that it actually felt even better than before. The realization dawned on her slowly, and she murmured that maybe this was what the training session was truly all about. Sihyun looked at Jae-seop with frustration and asked why he was dozing off when she was talking about something so important. She gently tried to nudge him awake, her voice slightly rising as she reminded him that she had asked him a question and wanted an answer. She asked again, a bit more seriously this time, whether he would continue doing resistance sessions with her or move on to someone else now that he had experienced it once with her. Jae-seop, barely registering her words, looked up groggily and asked what she meant by first experience. Feeling dizzy and completely drained, or had it been a vivid memory? Because what he saw felt real, like a memory resurfacing. He recalled that when all four of them had exercised together, it was Sihyun who had done the first technique with him. As she looked at his expression, puzzled, she asked if something was wrong. He quickly replied no and tried to mask his thoughts. Just then, her phone began to ring. It was her father calling. The following day, Jae-seop found himself sitting alone in the classroom, reflecting on everything that had happened the night before. In the end, the workout hadn't continued as expected. After answering her father's call, Sihyun had turned to him and asked if he could lend her some money for a taxi, saying that she needed to return home suddenly. He had handed over the money without hesitation, and she had thanked him warmly for everything that day before quickly leaving. He had been left behind, surprised by her sudden departure, calling out and asking what was going on, but she had already gotten into the taxi and disappeared from sight. That night had ended just like that, abruptly and unexpectedly. Now, in the present moment, Jae-seop sat in class and thought to himself with a chuckle that, for some strange reason, he felt unusually lucky. It was as though he had graduated from being just a simple, plain man to something else entirely. Not only had he experienced a first with one girl, but a second and third encounter had followed right after, and all of them on the same day. He joked internally that maybe he should buy a lottery ticket because with luck like that, perhaps he really could win first prize. As he was chuckling to himself at the thought, Eri suddenly approached him in class and casually suggested that the two of them talk for a bit. Jae-seop agreed to Eri's suggestion, and the two of them began walking together to get some drinks. As they walked, Jae-seop found himself wondering what was going on with her. He was confused by her sudden approach and couldn't help but think that she likely didn't even attend the class that had just ended. The thought hit him. Could it be that she had been waiting outside until the class was over just to scold him for missing the group meeting yesterday? A wave of uneasiness washed over him. His thoughts drifted to a flashback of the previous day when he and Sua had met and walked out together. He remembered asking her whether it was really okay to just leave like that, to which Sua had reassured him that everything would be fine and that she would cover for him. But now, it seemed clear that she hadn't done so, and as that realization dawned on him, he became even more anxious about Eri's potential anger. Returning to the present, Eri stood in front of him, handed him a drink, and offered an unexpected apology. She told him she was deeply sorry for everything she had said and done until now, and that she regretted the harsh words she had used with him. She sincerely apologized, calling him by the name Shim Jae-seop. He was visibly stunned by her words. Eri continued, saying that after reflecting on that night, she had realized it hadn't been just him who was in the wrong. She admitted that she had gone overboard and repeated her apology. She even bowed slightly and asked him to make sure to tell Sunbae about this properly, that she had apologized face-to-face and warned him not to twist her words or change the story. She wanted him to repeat exactly what she had said. She was looking really embarrassed for what she had done. She kept apologizing and asking for his forgiveness. Still surprised, Jae-seop later went to Sua to ask about everything that had happened. He wanted to know if she had asked Eri to come and apologize. Sua casually admitted that she had. He asked her what on earth she had said to make someone as stubborn as Eri apologize like that. Sua gave a small smile and said she'd explain it in detail later. He guessed aloud that she must have threatened to kick Eri out of the club. Sua clarified that it wasn't exactly that, but close she had told Eri that if she continued making everyone in the club uncomfortable, she would go to the professor and request a reassignment. She admitted that it amounted to the same thing. She explained that she hadn't originally intended to be that harsh. Her plan had been to brush it off, but Eri kept coming back and provoking her, and in the heat of the moment, she'd gotten upset. She added that she couldn't just stand by and let Eri pretend she only wanted to make up for ditching the workout. Sua concluded with a sigh that everything had ended well. Eri had apologized and, hopefully, would stop her behavior moving forward. Sua smiled and told Jae-seop that it had actually turned out to be a very good thing that Eri had apologized. She reminded him that even if Eri's personality was difficult, her grades and skills were top tier, always receiving a grades and carrying the team academically. Without Eri, the only people left were two idiots and a child. As she put it, and things could have ended disastrously. Jae-seop looked at her with a blank expression, wondering if she had just included him among the idiots. As he stood there trying to process it, Sua suddenly moved closer and leaned toward him. Surprised, he asked what she was doing. Sua responded casually, asking if he couldn't tell. He replied that he really didn't know what was going on, prompting her to say that they were still in a club setting. Jae-seop nervously pointed out that if someone saw them like this, it could be misunderstood. Sua dismissed his concerns, saying she didn't care if anyone saw them together. He said that maybe she didn't mind, but he did. With a playful smirk, Sua told him it was all his fault. He asked what she meant by that. She explained, a little annoyed, that he hadn't even finished their training session properly the day before. She had waited for him, thinking he'd return after dropping Sihyun off, but instead, he had gone straight home. She told him how hard it had been for her, and suggested they continue their interrupted session. Jae-seop lowered his head in embarrassment and apologized, admitting that he had fallen asleep out of exhaustion. He was at least relieved to hear that she hadn't waited all night. Sua assured him not to worry, saying that unlike some people, she didn't hold grudges. Then, with a mischievous glint in her eye, she invited him to her room for a full workout session, the one they couldn't complete the day before. Jae-seop's thoughts raced as he tried to interpret her words. Was she suggesting they do cardio together again? Before he could ask, she added that if he wanted, they could even do more than yesterday. She said she felt like she could accept anything he asked of her that day, and if he couldn't wait, they could even do it right away at her place. Flustered, Jae-seop quickly said he was sorry but had classes in 10 minutes, so a workout now was impossible. He nearly cried in frustration. Sua teased him, saying it was only one class and surely he could skip it. Jae-seop groaned and replied that he wished he could too, but it was Professor Beck's class. That professor was strict. He didn't mind students sleeping in class but would immediately fail anyone who skipped or was late twice. With a record like that, even one absence could result in an automatic F grade. Sua acknowledged that the professor's policy was intense and asked when his classes would finish. Jae-seop told her that his last class ended at 6 p.m. Sua looked a bit disappointed, but then asked if that meant she had to wait 4 whole hours for him. When he asked what was wrong, she announced that she'd head over to his house straight after his classes ended. And just then, she said she had an amazing idea. Sua had looked at Jae-seop with a playful spark in her eyes and shared what she described as an amazing idea. She thought it would be hilarious if he wore that bizarre item on his head and went to class like that. Jae-seop, visibly skeptical, had responded with concern, pointing out that the professor might think he had lost his mind and throw him out of the classroom. Sua had only laughed louder at his reaction and joked that if that happened, it would be even better because he wouldn't technically be marked absent, hitting 2 targets at once. She had then continued laughing, clearly enjoying her own joke. Jae-seop, amused despite himself, had told her that the idea was actually kind of brilliant, to which she had proudly agreed without hesitation. He had begun walking toward the door when Sua quickly clarified, saying that she had only been joking. While he stood there by the doorway, she muttered that it was annoying how she had wasted her energy on something pointless. Jae-seop, sounding a bit irritated, remarked that she should have just told him it was Professor Beck's class. She hadn't even given him time to explain himself. In response, Sua had admitted that her real intention had simply been to ask whether, in such a case, he would have skipped class to be with her. Jae-seop had replied that he would have done so if it had been any class other than Professor Beck's. As Sua processed his response, she noticed how he hadn't even paused to think before answering. She then quietly announced that she was leaving. When Jae-seop asked where she was planning to go, she turned around with a teasing smile and replied that if she told him, she wondered whether he would come along with her. At that time, in classroom 605, Professor Beck stood at the front, delivering a lecture on the evolving prospects of media. She explained to the class that, based on recent psychological studies supported by mathematical models, media platforms like television and radio did not facilitate communication as effectively as newer, more interactive channels. She emphasized that digital platforms involving active user engagement such as web content and internet streaming services were expected to dominate the communication landscape in the future. Jae-seop sat silently on one of the benches, his attention fixed more on his phone than the lecture. His face showed clear signs of tension as he noticed that Sua still hadn't read any of his messages. His mind wandered as he wondered whether he should have just skipped class. After all, perhaps things would have gone the way Sua had wanted. His thoughts drifted into a vivid memory of her earlier words when she had told him he could use her however he liked. Returning to the present moment, he reminded himself of his father's stern warning that one more F grade would mean losing his allowance. While Jae-seop wasn't particularly motivated by grades, the threat of losing his allowance carried weight. Try as he might, he couldn't focus on what Professor Beck was saying. His mind kept looping back to the fact that Sua had initiated everything this time. She had been the one who had proposed the workout session. Now, uncertainty gnawed at him. What if she started ignoring him because he had chosen class over her? Just then, his phone vibrated with a new message. It was from Sua instructing him to come to motel room number 307. There was also an image attached, although Jae-seop couldn't immediately tell what it depicted. Before he had time to examine it properly, another message came through, stating that because he had abandoned her, she was now healing on her own. A few seconds later, he noticed that the image had been deleted. He thought to himself how fast she had taken it down. Then another message arrived, saying that the air conditioning felt amazing. He typed a reply, asking if she was seriously sending these messages. Her response came quickly, and she remarked that even with the AC turned on, her body still felt strangely hot and uncomfortable. Jae-seop looked at his phone stunned. He asked himself what Sua was doing and questioned what kind of pictures she had been sending. Had she lost her mind? But then another thought dawned on him. Perhaps she was simply trying to suggest that she wanted to resume their training session. Meanwhile, Sua sat in her own space, staring at her phone with a heavy expression. When she noticed that he still hadn't responded, she typed out another message, telling him to forget it and to focus on his class, adding that she would take care of herself. Jae-seop read those words and couldn't help but wonder what she meant by taking care of herself. Did she plan to exercise alone? Not long after, another message arrived, and this time she stated that she had other guys to join her for her daily yoga routine. His heart sank. He desperately hoped she hadn't meant that literally. He berated himself internally for being such an idiot, especially since he knew how popular Sua was around campus. She was always surrounded by guys. He thought bitterly about how it had been thanks to her that he had gotten the opportunity to experience a proper yoga session. Now, however, he found himself questioning whether the allowance his father provided was truly more important than her. Although he was still in the lecture hall, his attention was nowhere near the material being taught. While struggling to compose himself, he suddenly noticed Eri sitting not far from him in the same class. Making sure to stay low and unnoticed by the professor, he maneuvered his way over to her desk. Eri appeared visibly shocked to see him standing there during class. Without speaking, he held up his phone, where he had typed a message saying that he needed her help and asking her to check her own phone. Curious, Eri pulled out her phone and saw multiple messages from him. One of them explained that if he picked up his bag, the professor would notice, and he asked if she could carry it out for him when the lecture ended. She frowned, wondering to herself what this idiot was planning to do in Professor Beck's class of all places. Another message soon appeared, promising that he would take her somewhere nice to eat next time. Eri stared at him in disbelief. She whispered under her breath, asking if he was completely out of his mind. She reminded him that if he got caught sneaking out, it would result in an automatic F grade. Jae-seop, however, replied that he didn't care and that he was willing to take that risk. His current concern wasn't his grade, something else had become more important. As he thought this, a strange sensation washed over him. His heart had just skipped a beat and he wasn't sure why. Shaking it off, he told Eri that he was trusting her and left the classroom without looking back. Eri called after him, trying to stop him, but he didn't turn around. Left behind, she sat in disbelief, asking herself if that had really been Jae-seop and trying to make sense of what was going on with him. Eventually, Jae-seop arrived at the motel and found himself standing in front of room number 307. He confirmed to himself that this was the place where Sua had said she would be. The card she had shown in the now-deleted image matched the number of the room. But just as he was about to knock, a troubling thought entered his mind. What if she had already invited another guy for the training session? What if she looked him in the eye and told him that she no longer needed someone like him? Before he could fully process these doubts, the door suddenly opened. Standing there was Sua, who looked at him calmly and, without a trace of surprise, told him that she had known he would come. Jae-seop arrived at the door of the targeted room, his heart slightly racing with anticipation and curiosity. As he stood there, he wondered aloud whether Sua really wanted to do a yoga session with him and if perhaps, just perhaps, she had been waiting near the door, expecting him to show up. Sua responded in a teasing tone, asking what he thought about that idea. Then, with a hint of mystery, she added that there was no particular reason, perhaps it was just a coincidence or, as she put it, the timing had been perfect. Jae-seop, still slightly confused, admitted that he had been wondering how she had known exactly when to open the door. Sua replied that she had simply gone with her instincts, saying she had a feeling and when that feeling came, she opened it. She added playfully that if the idea of her waiting for him made him feel more excited, then she would gladly claim that yes, she had indeed been waiting just for him. Jae-seop replied with uncertainty, admitting that he wasn't entirely sure how to feel about it, but it certainly seemed that way. Sua laughed, clearly enjoying his flustered reaction, and said that if he felt that way, then it was good. After the moment of teasing passed, Sua shifted the conversation, asking whether everything was fine with Professor Beck. She reminded him that being late, or worse, being caught sneaking out in the middle of class could result in an automatic F grade. She asked him seriously whether he regretted leaving class to come to her. Jae-seop calmly assured her that he didn't have any regrets. He explained that if he were the kind of person to regret coming, he wouldn't have come in the first place. He lived by the belief that he should never do something he would later regret. He admitted, though, that the risk of receiving an F grade was certainly nerve-wracking, especially since it would mean losing his allowance. Still, he joked that he wasn't exactly at an age where losing his allowance would destroy his life. Then, with a smirk, he added that if it came to that, he supposed he would just have to stay over at her place more often. Surely she'd be okay with that. Sua groaned lightly and told him to stop teasing her. Jae-seop chuckled and reminded her that she had been the one to start this back in the department lounge and even during class. He laughed again, his mood lighter now, and confessed that he had actually been incredibly nervous because of her. He asked her what she would have done if someone had caught them together back then. Then, in a slightly mischievous tone, Jae-seop added that since she had frustrated him so much today, he felt like frustrating her in return. Sua burst into laughter and responded with playful sarcasm, saying that in that case, maybe she deserved to be punished. Jae-seop was visibly surprised at her words. Sua leaned in closer and, still joking, said that since she had caused so much frustration to the adorable Jae-seop, she should be properly punished by him. She asked if he was even capable of punishing her the right way. Jae-seop became visibly nervous, his voice faltering slightly as he replied that if she talked like that, he wouldn't be able to help himself, he would end up punishing her all day long. He even exaggerated further, claiming he could do it straight for a week. Still keeping the conversation in playful territory, he said he'd punish her by putting her through the toughest, most exhausting training exercises.